Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to our Feminist Film Festival. Over these past 2 days, we've been looking at film screenings, panel discussions, and workshops, as well as master classes, looking at the various intersections of women's work as it pertains to film. So we'd like to welcome you to our session this afternoon, which is the last session of this 3-day film festival, a collaboration between Yanaya Gender Film and Dialogue Festival with the Center for Women and Gender Studies, the Media and Communications Department at Nelson Mandela University, the National Film and Video Foundation, and Yanaya. So it's been quite an exciting past 2 days, and we're hoping that today is obviously not going to be any different. I think we're just giving it a minute or so just to see if other attendees are joining us via our Zoom webinar. Colleagues are also joining us via our live stream on YouTube. So we're just allowing that stream of people to join in our session. In our program today, we are looking at 2 films, one Strike a Rock by Liki Saragas and Fortunate by Unomatamsa Mdaka, as well as a workshop right at the end that looks at job readiness in terms job readiness for emerging filmmakers and student filmmakers in the South African film and television industry by Usihle Hlophe. So that's how our program looks like for today. We're going to start off with a panel discussion on the film Strike a Rock by Ualiki Saragas, who unfortunately couldn't join us today due to a last-minute commitment. However, what I'm going to do, colleagues, is to just read her bio before I get into the synopsis of the film, just so that we could be familiar with the filmmaker who's brought us the film that we'll be discussing today. Just briefly, Aliki Saragas is a South African documentary filmmaker and photographer that's based in Johannesburg. Aliki's first documentary feature film, Strike a Rock, had a very successful local and international festival run during the Sheffield Documentary Festival and IDFA, and has won multiple awards, including the Amnesty International Award for Human Rights, for the Human Rights Best Documentary in multiple juries across the world. Strike a Rock, which looks at women in Marikana, launched a large impact campaign to demand justice and accountability for the community-based during the community for the community of Marikana, by hosting over 60 impact screenings worldwide with a community-based screening tour. Aliki was one of the drivers of the Johannesburg Impact and Advocacy Team in the newly formed NPO Sisters Working in Film and Television. And this set on its board from 2017 to 2019. Aliki is the owner of Elafos Productions, which is a company dedicated to cinematic storytelling that focuses on social justice content. Aliki's latest TV documentary that she directed, Born Survivor, that explores the intersections of GBV and albinism, was broadcast on CGTN in September of 2020. The feature-length version, I Marry, is being completed for a festival premiere in 2021. I'm just going to read the synopsis of the movie Strike a Rock before we get into the panel discussion. Strike a Rock is a story of 2 South African mothers and best friends who live in Marikana. The story focuses on how they are trying to cope with the tragedy that still echoes after the 2012 massacre that claimed the lives of 37 striking mine workers. On our panel today, we have Dr. Ntabiseng Motseme and Unwabisa Dlova, who are going to just be sharing reflections and commentary on the film itself. We do, of course, want to encourage colleagues to engage with us via the chat section of our webinar, as well as the chat section of our YouTube live stream for any engagement and commentary on the films, and as Dr. Ntabiseng and Nwabisa engage. I'm going to read the bios of our 2 panelists. Dr. Ntabiseng Motseme is currently the academic director at the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences. Her research interests include African feminist and womanist theories, African cultural production and subjectivities, townships and township women's shifting identities, truth and reconciliation commissions, and women's memories. Some of her other interests also include African spiritualities and meanings of death and women's experiences and transformation in higher education. She currently serves on the editorial boards of the African Identities and Feminist Legal Studies. Our second panelist is Unwabisa Dlova, who is a social worker, intersectional African feminist, social justice activist, sexual reproductive health advocate, a women's human rights activist specializing in HIV and AIDS education and gender-based violence training. She is committed to advancing social justice through groundwork and passionate about the education of a Black child, ensuring that young women have access to information, access to services, and participation in decision making. All right, so that's just the bios of our two panelists who will be speaking to us and just reflecting on Strike a Rock. I'm going to allow the panelists just a few minutes to just give their first reflections on the film and the first thoughts on the film. Should I start with Dr. Ntabiseng? Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thanks. Thanks, Pogazi, and greetings to everyone. So good to be here. What an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for the invite, a gracious invite to be here today. I was so looking forward to at least the filmmaker, Aleki Sargas, because this is a truly, absolutely what I thought was a brilliant, brilliant film, and mode of a storytelling of the very tragic massacre that, of course, happened in 2012 and left us with almost 40 men, fathers, grandfathers, sons, and uncles, and friends to people that left us. And in fact, before I start, I would like to just have a moment of silence of those who lost their lives during that time. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I wanted to just really also see and thank the filmmaker for what I think is, in fact, a film which constructs an African feminist womanist epistemology. And I'm going to run quickly of why I say that, or why I think the way in which the film has been. I don't come from film studies or anything like that, but in the way that the film has been constructed and pulled together, it certainly for me demonstrated some of the work. It kind of spoke back, mirror imaged some of the things that I've been talking about over the years as well, around ways of African women's ways of knowing. And in the way that she does it, in terms of the layers that she brings through, of course, the two protagonists of the documentary, Sonti and Matunega Makwa Mana, the two women who are the central mode of which the story then unfolds, and we get into their lives. She allows us to explore their lives and the effects of this tragedy, a historical tragedy in our country. And so why I'm calling it, why I think it's an African, it demonstrates an African woman's epistemology, a way of knowing, is in the ways that it, for me, invites us to what I've called in my other works, I call alternative memory side, through African women's voices, and actually doing an active listening of African women's voices, where then they invite us to what I've called an alternative memory site. This is vis-a-vis, works in parallel to the more macro state-sanctioned, institutional memory sites, which would be embodied in platforms such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and in this case through sort of the non-min players and other state political parties as well, other more, state and what I would call formal political memory sites. So women, when you really listen close, and this largely came through works that I did almost 15 years ago on the TRC, they began us to invite us to this alternative memory site. And we, in this military site, this memory site also does something very interesting epistemologically for us in terms of theory formation, in terms of methods that we use to understand women's life, particularly African women's life, and more specifically poor African women's lives. It invites us to, in theory making, to move, and I think I picked that up as well. I picked that up as well in the filmmaking, the experientiality of it, the lived experience as a base for knowledge production. So the film, did that for me, and that's always for me in terms of women's ways of knowing, that experiential knowledge as experiential, knowledge as embodied. And so what these alternative memory sites do is that they force us to think of knowledge very differently. That's where I'm getting at. And one of the things, as you know, that through the work that I've done with Truth, which is really listening to women's memories of violence, women's experiences of violence, is one of, from the recollections, from the listening, from the theory, that notion of a bottom-up theory. So from the voices of the women, and when women are embodying and what women are saying, we then begin to construct theory. So that is what I'm referring to when I talk about an experiential mode of theory formation. And I felt that as well, I connected to that in the film as well. We're speaking very similarly in terms of that idea of African women's ways of knowing. And so one of the things, as you know, that I've said is, in one of the articles I say, in women, in kind of looking and reading women's memories of violence, the experiences of violence, come that not only silence should be invested with meaning, but also dreams, praise, gestures, sounds, tears, smells, taste, flesh. These are the places that oppressed women often house their memories and thus ground their experiences of violence and violation. And of course, many studies, as we know, do confirm this. This is where the powerless will the critiques of power, as we see also in this film. It's a critique of hegemonic power, will ground that in alternative memory. Others have called in unofficial vehicles. So the film, I think, confirms that in a very powerful way, and hence calling it, it is an African feminist woman epistemologically based film, or constructs rather even that, it goes as far as constructing. So interestingly, when we look, I just want to, and why I'm referring a bit to this, referring a bit to some of the work on memories of past violences, is I want us to keep that very strong idea of linkage and connection and intergeneration as something that within social, within the way that we theorize, think through, understand, particularly poor women's experience, we need to keep that category very much alive. We haven't, and I think we really need to bring back this category of intergeneration and linkages of past memories of violence, past violences against women, against women's bodies, and against women's experiences. So one of the things that I'm going to read very quickly, and I just want to show you the similarities that come up almost 20 years later. This is from TRC in Marikana, August 16, 2012, we're still playing out the very same themes. And perhaps this is something we need to talk through. So some of the things from when I looked at women's, recollections of violence, and this is 15 years, this is work done 15 years ago. It was political violence and the violation of sanctuary spaces, the attack of the African family, of the home, the political violence and damaged possessions, the damaging of the home. And the role of possessions, the role of particularly in a context of poverty, when accumulation of assets is done and then it is destroyed, whether it's through a fire, through rains or whatever, and what that means is also, I was looking at that in that space. Political violence and the defilement of sacred spaces. And here I was looking at the impact of violence on death and African cosmology. Political violence and landscapes. And here maybe we can even just say political violence or violence and land. Political violence and silences. And something very interesting that also came up here, which I could see, was this whole issue that I think we also need to explore a bit more. In fact, I think Klengewa's work does this exactly, which is women's resistance and political consciousness, that women often arrive at political consciousness through very different paths, to example, to men, and what that means for, political organizations that are formed by women as well. And of course then, which is in fact what the ending of and I believe it was said by Umama Tune when she says, my ultimate goal is healing. So women's notions, poor African women's notion of healing, I think comes out very strongly. And how long do I have? Do I have another 5 minutes? Spogas?
Perhaps about 2. I'll still allow you time to unpack as we go. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll just go on for about 3 minutes. So here we guys are saying, this is around, the work I was doing was around the 1970s, 1980s. Democracy, post 2012, 37 striking mine workers are killed, for fighting for a living wage. Themes that come this brilliant film, You Strike a Woman, You Strike a Rock. Everyday life. My connection. Can you still hear me, colleagues? Everybody, friends? Can you hear me?
Yes, go on, Doc.
Can I go on? It's telling me it's unstable. So some of the themes, and I'll just touch on, and then we can go into detail because of time. So the themes that come out very strongly through the unfolding of the lives of Uma Primrose Uma Sonti, Uma Makakwana, is the issue of everyday life. This is the central, and this has been found in women's memories, particularly of violence, the experiences, that everyday life becomes the contextual base in which they then, share the narratives of violence. And in bringing us actually to the everyday, rather than the kind of, the public, the big narratives, right? The macro narratives, the political, the state-sanctioned narratives, that's when they pull us to what I'm calling this alternative memory site. The material conditions, women bring us back squarely to the material and the importance of the material. Not only the importance, but also their role in maintaining the everyday as well as the material under conditions of poverty and violence. And here, of course, I'm thinking of all the images, which, it was very powerful. The film brought that very powerful for me. The shacks, the flushing toilets for all, in fact, a political, slogan. Later on, the lack of access to electricity, all of these challenges, children are very central. I love the way children were always present in this narrative, whether it was political work or otherwise, they were there. So we see all of this, women bring, and often people have said that, when we start talking and focusing on women's life, the political economy goes away. In fact, for me, it becomes extremely magnified and very, very real and material. The land. alternative memory women also bring us back to the land. And here I've spoken about the whole question of land, not just as a physical or a physical uprootedness, but also as a spiritual displacement. I can talk more later. In the song, the centrality of song and prayer, dress, the colorfulness of dress. That's why I decided I'm going to wear the colorful red and earrings. I was inspired by the film, this morning, that even in a context of poverty, in a context of dehumanization, in a context of, extreme violation, women still are able to, construct a dignified life through dress, through song. Prayer is central. I speak about this and I can talk later as well. As I've said before, prayer is also part of the economy of silence, of the languages of silence that African women have used to construct alternative notions of being. The issue of repeated experiences of death is where the death issue is quite central, and of course the load on women around this, it comes up in the film. And this was, I think, a running thread throughout, which was Uspogasi Makatla from Rhodes did a fantastic seminar on this notion of the politicization of wifehood, of motherhood, of grandmotherhood, and social motherhood, and how these, contrary to what other, some Western feminists are saying, they're saying these cannot be the ground of a radical practice. In fact, a lot of African feminists and women are saying it can, and I think the film indeed demonstrates that it definitely can be that. Again, the film is a brilliant, for people who work in resistance, this is a brilliant case study of the politicization of women, and of course issues around African women and leadership. It's just a brilliant case study to untangle and look at some of these things and how African women's organizations' political agendas must then, be different if they are based on all these notions. I'm about to finish. I know, as far as you gave me 3 minutes, promise you I'm about to round off. And so what it brings to question, one of the questions is bringing, so I'm moving more to kind of, what is it bringing up for us to think through really deeply and pause and challenge our scholarship, our ways of maybe even, making future films around poor African women's lives who continue to live under epistemic violence, under, material violence as well. It's this whole question for me, it's the whole question of activist knowledge. We begin to really mainstream that knowledge into so-called official, whether it's the academy or spaces such as film, how do we bring activist knowledge as informing us of what knowledge is? The other thing that I think is, and that was, in fact, I also picked up on this I recently had a conversation with Grace Masilo on her book Wangaran Matai, Registers of Freedom, which is very much about this issue of African women's activist knowledge, which I think we've pushed to the side, and we need to talk through that. The other issue I think that needs to talking through is the title itself. You struck woman, you struck a rock, and how I think, contemporary feminisms are challenging this notion of African women as rocks. And we're beginning to see a lot more, insertions around humanization, around healing, and I think in a way that sort of paradoxical play on that very popular phrase that we're all familiar with, is then almost, she almost challenges it when she herself says, my main goal is to heal. Because we live in a traumatized community, the massacre has caused extreme trauma in the community. The pain is still there. Usabhlungu, ayibhlungu nyani, and working our way through that. So I'll stop right there. Thank you for allowing me a few extra minutes.
Thanks, Doc. I'm going to bring in Mrs. Nwabisa just to give us her first reflections and commentary.
Good day, everyone. Sorry, I am very humbled to be here this afternoon and just part of what I really appreciated about the film was that it was very inviting and it was very relatable. And part of it, I remember that when what happened to Marikana in 2012. I was a second year student, and I knew that what happened was very painful and everything, but I never really took time to think about what exactly happened on that day, or on the events that led to that day. But the film is inviting us then to reflect deeper on what happened on that specific day, and part of it being that the voices of women were kind of forgotten on that, on what we were seeing on the media. It was this reflection of what men were fighting for, and sorry, to the point up to the day that they got shot and died. But the film is taking us back to what was the role that was played by women? What is the role that was played by everyone in the community on that particular day, or on the days that led to that event? So I remember again meeting what happened to Marikana back in 2018, when one of our colleagues from the UK invited Aliki and Mam Tumeka and Mam Sonti to Masmanyane Women's Rights International in East London, and they screened the film for us. And I had so many questions, and I was asking myself that if there is so much to it that this film is showing us, why is it that it was not shown to us? Because it was almost made as if the whole thing was the death of the men being shot on that day, and that was it. But there was nothing that was taking us through what specifically happened. So my special interest was what was the role that was played by women on that day, and also on the days leading to that. So part of it also having a conversation yesterday with Mam Tumeka. We usually have conversations, but it was not on a daily basis, because from that day when we met them in East London in 2018, I kept contact with them, including Mam Sonti and also Mam Tumeka. So yesterday I spoke to Mam Tumeka and trying to find out that where are we in terms of development, since the Lomnin was trying to say that they were going to make amends, and the 5,500 houses were going to be built. And the last time that we checked, it was said that only 3 houses were built. So on the conversation with Mam Tumeka yesterday, she told me that for that matter, the owners of the platinum mine are no longer Lomnin, but it is now Sibanye. It is now Sibanye, and things have changed. And she was basically saying that they would actually prefer Lomnin than Sibanye, and it made me really look back and say, but Lomnin was what you were crying about and complaining that they were not doing things accordingly. And she was saying that they were not doing things accordingly, but it was better. And she was basically saying that there's many divisions in the community now, and specifically in terms of leadership positions, that they were saying that the amendments were actually creating more divisions in the community than actually rectifying what happened. She was saying that in terms of leadership positions, there's certain people that were given leadership positions and others left behind, just creating the level or a hierarchy of the haves and the have-nots, and they have now all of a sudden siding with the mine, and then they have not still fighting for justice. And she further told me that the people, the families of the men that died on that day, that were compensated, and that the women were hired in the mine. And she was also saying that there is still no roads in Marikana and Ghaneng. There's still no electricity, and there's still no there's no roads, there's no water, there's no electricity. And she was basically saying that they've been waiting for houses, and to a point where she had to move, and she's now staying with in her daughter's house because she cannot afford to have her own house. So one thing that I've also read further about Marikana and Nkaneng and everything was the divisions, and also the tribalism issue, that it was now an issue of who are you, and are you part of something that I wanted to address was, when Marikana was introduced to us, it was something that was happening there. It was not something that we related with until I watched the film, and I realized that we were living similar lives with the people that were staying in Marikana, specifically in Nkaneng, because our fathers and our brothers and our uncles, they leave the rural Eastern Cape and they go to the mines. We never really get to understand what is happening there. We never really get to understand how life changes when they get there. But the film then paints a picture of what exactly is happening there, and it takes me to identifying that actually the role that is played by women is very important, because not only the men are leaving the women behind to raise their children and also take care of their families, but also when they get there, they have lives. And even if we it might be something that is not really comfortable to talk about, but also when they get there, they meet other women that are staying in the communities that are close by in Marikana. So those women are actually also taking care of these men, because they would be doing the laundry and the cooking for them and updating what is happening. And also, if someone gets hurt, they are also taking care of those men that actually got hurt. And I'm also thinking that even on that day when the shooting happened, there were women who were there, who were actually doing the work, not only in terms of the protest and everything, but also of taking care of men and women that got injured on that day. And I think it is something that Bev Ditsier was saying, the erasure of feminist voices or women's voices into the whole thing, because I feel like when we were introduced to what happened in Marikana, it was more about the men that died, but it was never on what was happening on the ground in terms of what was the role that was played by women, what were the women doing. It was not only in terms of supporting the men, but it was also women there at the forefront doing the work and making sure that their voices were heard. And it takes me back to what Mam Tumeka said, that even during the commission's inquiry, it was women who were more vocal, and it was women who were outside and protesting. It was women who actually, even when the commission was moved from Lomnen to I think in Pretoria, they had to leave things behind and go there. I remember specifically her saying that even those who were looking for jobs, they had to stop looking for jobs and go to protest outside the commission. And even those who were working, some got fired because they were now taking more days off in order for them to support what was happening. And she was also saying that there were men that were back at work. So the reason why women had to take over and they needed them to be there in huge numbers was because they felt that the men were back at work. So it took me then back to say that I think it is something that Dr. Ntabiseng was talking about the children being there and experiencing. And I remember hearing that there was no trauma or debriefing that was done. And it takes me then back to the work that is done by women that then Sikhala Sonke then was formed to provide some sort of a system or a support system for women and for the children. And I remember part of it in the film where there was this young girl who was raped and was scared then to report the case, because they thought that if they did report the case, then they were going to lose someone who was going to put the food on the table. Then it takes you back to how women have to constantly have to weigh their options, that if I do this, what is going to happen? And it means that you can't even think about yourself only, but you have to also think about what will happen to the other people in the room. So also part of it going back to the service delivery, not only in terms of the mine delivering and bringing living wages that were adequate for the miners, but how that affected women that were back at home, because now they literally had to stop sending money back at home because they were not making enough to support the families that were back at home in the Eastern Cape or in Mozambique or in Lesotho. But they also had to take care of the families that they started when they got to Marikana, the families of the women that they met in Marikana, and also taking into consideration that taking into consideration that they now had to supplement the wages that they were getting from the mine with the social grants, but also saying that the experience of Marikana or the Nkaning people is not different from any other South African, because you would have, like, for example, if they have trouble with roads and access to clinics and access to water and everything, it means that there are sometimes when it is raining. I think it showed in the film that when it is raining, it is very difficult to access Nkaning, and it means that if someone is pregnant and they need to go to the hospital to give birth, it means that they would have to wait until the next day to go there. But if then the person is already there where she has to give birth, then it means that they're going to give birth at home. And the child that is being born at home, that they're going to struggle getting a certificate, a birth certificate, which is something that most, it is the experience of most South African women, especially in the township and also in the rural areas. So even access to schools, it means that there was someone who was saying that if maybe they moved their child from the Eastern Cape or maybe from Mozambique, they would have to go to Marikana, and the medium of language is being Setswana. And then that being Setswana, that means that if you were maybe used to speaking Portuguese or you were used to speaking isiXhosa, then you would have to change then into to being able to understand Setswana. So yeah. So then also during the conversation that I had with Mam Tumega, she was saying that she had since left Sikhala Sonke. She started her own organization, which is called Sinetemba, where they are doing beading and clothing and traditional clothing, which is now her means of income. And she had, I think after the document or the film, she had gone to Britain to try to fight the system from that side. And she was saying that she got funding, which she recently started her NGO this year. But due to lockdown restrictions, she was unable then to continue with the work, because she was saying that the women in Marikana, because they had to move in order for them to learn how to do the beading, they had to go to where she stays. And she was saying that they depended on the bus and of the buses that are owned by the mines, and there was struggle because they would have to show a clocking card, but now that they are not working in the mine, it means that they were unable to go into the buses of the mine. So they had to make other alternatives into making sure that these women, they come to her to learn more about beading. Yeah, I think that's my reflection for now. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nobisa. And of course, we're just going to weave out just some of those reflections from yourself and Dr. Motseme. I think maybe the first theme I'd like us just to reflect upon is the one on leadership. You know, Nobisa was talking about how there was this constant erasure of women's voices, and we see that particularly with Umam Primrose when she now comes back into the community to mobilize for one of the EFF events, and there's this contestation of why Mum Primrose is not on stage, right? That active and that erasure that happens even when, right? If we'd like, she's earned her position to be on stage and to celebrate and to be seen by her community. But the contestation there comes more so from her community and the people from Uskala Sonke that come in to challenge as to why Umam Primrose is not centered there. So I just like some commentary there in terms of how Umam Primrose approaches leadership, and how perhaps her approach to leadership might not have at that point, particularly in this point in the film, be seen as assertive enough, where she was exercising, if you like, organizational discipline. And so she's not able to be centered in that particular moment that the community renders important for them, one, but secondly, important for her as well, to be on stage as well in that moment. So I'm just going to allow Dr. Motseme first, and then Sis Nwabisa.
Greetings, colleagues. I'm on two platforms. Can you hear me?
Yes. So what you have to do, Doc, is to just mute the audio of one of those platforms.
Interestingly, it's muted, so let me leave it. I'll leave the platform because I was having problems with the laptop. So I'll leave it again and
Perfect.
be back here. Better?
This is clear. Yeah.
Yes, I was just, it kept throwing me out on this platform, but at least it's behaving for now. Yes, the issue, I think, of leadership, as I mentioned, it was quite interesting and central in the way that it played it itself out. It was actually quite painful because it's a very familiar narrative within women leadership, where you find in contexts like this, someone starts to progress, and the issues of class cleavages become very more visible and clear, and then there's that emotional kind of struggle within individuals, in this case the two friends, as well as within the community. And we're familiar with this as I think and it's something quite important, I think, to pause and deliberate on, because we are seeing more women into leadership positions of VC. Soon there'll be a president. I think the CEOs are going to also increase as well around us. And how do we resolve this issue of assertiveness, of what we perceive as assertiveness, vis-a-vis also African ways of resolving conflict. So I think there was, for me, it was quite a painful moment, as I said, because it's quite familiar, and it's something, as having been in leadership positions, have experienced, of where once there was community, we actually start to see disintegration of women's communities through people taking higher positions, and the need for others to also feel that they are also progressing within their lives as well. And how, very sadly, as you were talking and just sharing just now, you're saying to us that that in fact the relationship isn't as number one what it was, but two, she's actually no longer even part of the Sakasonke, that organization. She's from their own as well. So it's an issue. I don't necessarily, for me, that I don't see it myself necessarily as that Is it that she was being assertive or not assertive, or was she deploying a way of resolving, and her understanding of resolving conflict and what assertiveness means for a woman who's grounded within, a kind of an African patriarchal. Yes, she is in other spaces where we see her assertiveness. In fact, she's clearly, acting in feminist ways, but there is that paradoxical tension, which I'm not uncomfortable with at all, actually. I think it's a way in which we need to also allow women to work out their politics in terms of working out their positionalities, which are, as African women, we're often in many tensions. It's the traditional, there's patriarchy, there's a kind of, within a context where you're thrown into leadership as well. They are institutional, as she did, she opted to put precedent of those. So they're often these competing power struggles that need to be worked through. And for us to kind of reproduce, I think for me, polarities that she's either acting this way or that way, I think, personally, I think we need to kind of get to an analytical point of more trying to position her and see who she is, and try to then untangle what is happening at that moment as well, because I think there was actually a lot of layers that were there as well.
Thanks, Doc. Let me bring you in, Sis Nobisa. And perhaps maybe you could also, as you comment on that, maybe also just comment on, there's also a moment in the film where Mam Primrose no Mam Tumega are having a conflict of some sort where it appears that they're not in communication with each other. And one of the younger members of Iskala Sonke comes in to help mediate that. And so what we're seeing is also how they've managed to create some form of succession of leadership in the structure that is able to be sustainable when the two of them are outside of that. So perhaps you can just, if you can, just comment on that as well.
Thank you very much. I think for us, we are used to this notion that of being used to women being at the grassroots level, where they are just doing the groundwork. We don't see them as people that eventually would actually climb the ladder and be up there. And I think it is something that we have normalized, that if someone was doing groundwork with us and was vocal on the grassroots, and then they climb the ladder and they go up, and then we immediately start labeling them as, that or this or that. And we never actually take into consideration that even when we're doing grassroots work, at some point there's going to be, there has to be growth, there has to be a laddering approach where we don't only talk amongst ourselves, but we deploy people that are going to be talking on behalf of us up there. So, and I think this is something that Mam Tumeka was saying, that it was causing divisions for them, because the people who are actually in the seats of decision making, they were now taking certain people, and some of them maybe people that were not there when this whole thing was started, and then now this was causing further divisions between the communities, and also specifically for Skala Sonke, because she was saying that she had then started her own organization that deals with something else, because she was seeing that there was differences, because there was now the issue of status or class, because there was then Mam Sonti, and then there was her, and then there was the rest of the Skala Sonke family, and most of them of the Skala Sonke maybe members feeling that Mam Tumeka was trying to erase the influence or the impact that was done by Mam Sonti. So those dynamics we see on a daily basis, and I think we are kind of used to women just doing the groundwork, to women just voicing out whatever their concerns are from the background. But when it comes to climbing the ladders of positions of influence, or maybe maybe someone getting a recognition, then we start looking like, no, she was not supposed to go there. She was still supposed to be doing the work here. But now my concern would be if Mamsondi continued to stay in Marikana and maybe not go into parliament, maybe we wouldn't even have heard her voice, or maybe we wouldn't even have heard what exactly happened on that specific day. So, and I think part of what brought the attention into what happened in Marikana is the voices coming out, even during maybe the rally that was done, where also Julius Malema was, and them talking about what was happening, where they come from. So I also look at how even amongst themselves, that Mam Primrose and Tustumeka, they have differences, because now they were used to doing things together. They were used to discussing things together, but now it almost felt like the other one was no longer relevant, or didn't understand the situation of what was happening in the grassroots anymore. And because they were up there, and even the one who's up there also feels like, no, you don't understand that I have a lot of work to do, and also have different meetings to attend to. So then that break of communication, even though that you realize these people are still fighting the same cause, but because of lack of communication, or also in terms of lack of but even that thing of we think that when someone is up there, then they're no longer representing us; they're representing themselves, or maybe that's the impression that we've had with people that came before us. But that lack of communication, where they are no longer updating each other, and I think it's something that is important that you've mentioned, that maybe it was an issue of maybe establishing the organization, and maybe even take a step back to allow the members of the organization to also grow and be able to be in positions where even themselves, like Mamsondi, they can be in positions where they are in a different level than they were back in 2012. So if we could actually challenge the social norms of how we see women in leadership positions, that we can't be. I always say that even in the feminist spaces, I don't have to like the other person, as long as they know that we don't even have to be friends, but as long as they know that we are fighting for the same cause, and they know that if there is something akubuliwa corner, I'll be there and I'll be fighting next to them. I don't have to like them. I don't have to be friends with them. I don't have to talk to them on a daily basis. But when they give me a call and say, Nwabisa, I'll be there, and I won't be asking questions that why did you just disappear on me? Why were you not doing this? Why were you not updating me on this? So if we change we challenge also the social norms and the attitudes to what a woman in leadership should actually look like. It would actually help us, because then this idea of this woman who is going to be humble, is not going to be asking questions, is just going to be there representing us, and it's going to be representing us in a very humble and polite manner. It has not worked for us, and it has worked at some point, but most of the time it has not worked, and it needs us to be more firm when we are addressing issues. And yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Nabisa. And I think that's an important point to bring there about the complexities of friendships first, but now more so you're also touching on the need for growth to happen, and how growth happens within their particular relationship as they grow in the positions that they hold. I want to come back to a point that Dr. Ntabiseng and Nobisa mentioned, a theme rather, in their earliest reflections, on the intentionality of healing, and how the work quite strongly, Mam Tumeka at the beginning says, Lonmin was a place of contrast even before the massacre, and later on she is sharing with us how she received a certificate for being part of a workshop on healing and trauma, and she centers that particularly in terms of how she executes her leadership, and that the community for her and the work that she does must go beyond just the socio-economic the discourses of what the massacre brings. And so she also looks and touches on the need for healing to happen within the space. And we see this happening. She then says later that this community is traumatized because of the impact of the massacre, but we see this GBV element coming in with the child and the father, and those dynamics that come to that. Perhaps just your thoughts on that, on how, you know, Mam Tumeka particularly has then challenged herself to get an education, but this education is not just for herself, it's also for her to be able to do the work that's important in the community, that particular education and the skill set that she's building for herself are there to heal the community, particularly with, as it relates to the trauma that was experienced by the community. We'll start with Dr. Motseme. I am seeing some comments, colleagues, in the chat section. We'll take those in a moment.
Yeah, no, healing is a motif that I think, again, this is this notion of these alternative memories that African women's memories, African women's lived experiences of violence invite us to. We are but vessels, really. We are, you know, those of us at least who are situated in universities, who are privileged enough to be in, you know, in those spaces. We are but vessels to what we need to reflect in our scholarship. It really is already for me in front of us through these voices and through the embodiments of especially poor women. And the healing issue is something, and I'm going to link it also to, I see a comment being asked around the sort of the similarities of narratives around TRC and Marikana, and how central the idea of healing becomes for in women's narrative, because women again carries, women are the custodians of culture, they are the custodians of healing as well, in our communities as well. Symbology around women is very strong when it comes to healing. But what for me is what women and even the women in Ghana, start to challenge us to think through healing in very a more, I think, holistic perspective, in a perspective that involves, and this is why I mentioned earlier on this, the prayer, the centrality of prayer, the centrality that healing does not always have to be something that is necessarily about voice, that healing does not have to be something necessarily that is about, a public performance of some sort, but that in drawing from our African cosmological, cultural, as well as spirit notions of spirituality concepts, women actually bring that forth, and how healing involves both the land, the surroundings, the material. So very central in her. She's not giving this, what another person would think, would maybe define as a woolly perspective on healing, which of course is not, which is psycho-social, emotional. That is not where Africans' notions of healing stop. If you look at in a very, comprehensive way, the environment she talks, and the film for me was really good in depicting that, in kind of the materiality that doesn't change, of the flooding when the rains come, and she's having to put on top of the room, walk on the water. That requires a healing on some level, and she's very clear about that, I think, as well, of linking the socioeconomic with how that also is also actually linked to the socio emotional as well. And then we can't have a perspective. African women's life, and especially as I always say, poor African women's life, provide us with the, their lived experience, literally their blood and sweat, and we're just not listening. It, shows us how healing is this multifaceted and cannot be distinguished. You don't go to just the psychologist for this and just this for that. They say to us, the emotional, the spiritual, the material is all intertwined, and in fact is a part. And in fact, even in that healing notion and concept, they include even the land itself. That all of these things, we must now go and figure it out. They've lived it. We now have to go and find frameworks that actually do not betray this experience. So I think, I just, want to put that in, that the politically economic issues around power are part of this, are incorporated as part of, for me, of this film that for me is an African, feminist and womanist film, even in its depiction of healing. The material is clearly there, and it's weaved all across in the narratives of the women and in the lives that they live. It is not divorced from the pain in which that they also experience. There's a lot of, picked up a lot, came very strong within TRC, those memories of relating what had happened 10, 15 years ago. Even so that is, linked to the pain, the emotional pain, and those things. I love the word that I think it was it was Matume. I think she used the word I love that word. I really thought, that actually summarizes the emotional landscape that many women who live through violence have to occupy on a daily basis, but make sure that, they make sure that the everyday continues for the sake of families and the children in particular. And that, of course, is all around about the silent work, the unacknowledged work, what we all call women's work. So they bring that into the forefront, as that also needs, that there's this thing, I feel the emotion that is part of the healing process. As I mentioned, the land, the surroundings, the material, and also the strategies they begin to show us, I think, illuminate strategies that make sense for them, may not make sense for you and I, but really make sense for them in terms of crafting lives. They have to continue to live the lives that they live, while me and, another person will take your bag and be off, go in your car and you're off to wherever you go. They need to continue to build and reproduce seeing silence, seeing crying as language, of crying as language, and learning that they're also challenging us, those of us who are doing research, they're challenging us to say, you need to find a language around crying. What is that language that women, when they are wailing and crying, how do we, as African scholars, really now start to surface and give that and give it meaning as well? The circles that there were so many for me images in the film which were thrown at different points around circles, a lot of issues which for me links to African cosmology, links to the past, links to kind of ancestral knowledge, links to women's knowledges as they are passed down, and how they then are able to formulate these lives of dignity within violence. So so they and of course the silence, what I call speeches of desire, prayer as a speech of desire, as a way also for me in which a lot of women, it was a space in which the reconstruction of who they were could happen. It wasn't within, there was an alternative way in which to reconstruct being within prayer. So women, but more importantly for me, what women bring to the forth is that healing is not this, in the way that we've understood, is all these elements which are disparate, and they really bring what I think is a revolutionary, and in fact globally revolutionary, idea of what it means to heal. I think African women do that for us, and also then the second aspect in which they bring to in terms of healing for me is what I spoke about earlier, that intergenerational healing. Women are responsible for that, and often in our work when we do research or we tell, we need showing to the fore how women actually work to tie these cords of the intergenerational cords of communities. So community, individual is important, community is important here, the environment is important here as well as the interior life, the socio-spiritual, the socio-emotional life. So as I say, I think, just a quick one as well. I think I loved the way there was the element, I don't know if anyone also picked it up in the film, of the issue of time. And I think it did do in some ways, for me, that's what it was doing. It was making the connection of, the historical with the present, and how these violences continue and they're not changing for women. There were those images where you saw a woman, she was going to go and get firewood, and she had the firewood. There was also an image I thought was very powerful, where the whole load, and which summarized, actually those two women for me summarized where we are as women, and the work that still needs to be done as well. So I really, as I say, I enjoyed the way in which I thought for myself would call it a theory, a theory, a very holistic theory, a powerful theory of healing was communicated by the film. Thanks.
Thanks, Doc. And I think you did, to some extent, just touch on the question Dr. Babala is bringing in. I'm just going to read it before we go to Nwabisa, just to bring it into the chat so everyone here can engage with it or ponder on it. She says, I was interested in Dr. Motseme's mention about the similarities between TRC and Marikana after the August massacre. Can you please elaborate on how this violence gets normalized and we continue every day with the political and structural violence? And I think your input now is speaking to that as well. I'm going to allow Unwabisa just to give her input, but I just want to read just another comment so we bring that into the engagement. I just had it. Okay, I think it's from Nomalanga. I think it's from Kize. It says the power dynamics and conflicts in Black communities are more complex than can simply be explained either by class or by influence. Communities have their own power brokers with power and influence and status being drawn from a myriad of sources. So I'm just bringing that into the conversation. Nwabisa?
Thank you. So yesterday, we also spoke about healing with Mam Tumeka, because I was asking her that who is helping the helper or who is taking care of the carer. And I was specifically talking to them that it looks as if they had built their lives around helping other people, but there was little that was said about them receiving help. And I think it's something that Dr. Ntabiseng has already mentioned, the power of prayer for them. It shows in the film, and also it shows the sisterhood that was created, and it was seen throughout during the film, and because of what Sikala Songe is doing. So she was telling me that she then continued studying on trauma and debriefing, because she was feeling that while they wait for the socio-economic change that they were fighting for whether in terms of wages and in terms of maybe service delivery and them having water and electricity and the roads in their community. But they felt that there was a lot of healing that needed to happen emotionally and spiritually, because there is nothing that can be done to erase what happened on that specific day. Not only for the families that had lost the people on that day, but also for the communities who experienced what happened. So she was telling me that she's continuing providing services of trauma debriefing to the communities, and she's actually getting paid for doing it. So she is also one of her side hustles that she's saying that she's trying by all means to remain stable and to remain economically empowered. And she was saying that she was in a process of actually having an event on the 16 days of activism, and she was feeling that there was a lot of work that needed to be done in the community, because they were seeing high levels of gender-based violence, and they were seeing that there were a lot of people that were still angry on what happened in Marikana, and that it was not an issue that people were just only angry with each other, but the way that things were happening, not only in terms of the families, but it also in terms of the economy, of the community at large, and friendships, and how they were at a point where they were scared of having their voices erased, or people of South Africa just forgetting, because I think that was her main concern, that she was scared that at some point there was going to come a time where they were going to be forgotten by everyone, even including the mine, even including South Africans. Everyone was going to forget that there were people there that still needed healing, not only in terms of the socio-economic part, but also in terms of the emotional side, and also in terms of their spiritual life. So when I actually said, okay, Mam Tumeka, I understand that everything that you are mentioning is what you do for other people, how you go around looking for help for other people. But what about you? How about when are you actually going to get to a point where you are addressing what happened, like in a personal level, not only in terms of what happened to the community and what you are trying to do? Because I understand that you are providing debriefing, and you're providing gender-based violence services, but what is it that you are doing for yourself? Are you looking at finding outside of yourself other ways of actually going forward? Because it is going to come a time where all this actually, maybe the dust settles, and everything that you wanted actually happens, then you would still be left with yourself, with the trauma that you also experienced, because part of, at some point in the film, there is someone, I forgot the name, oh God, but her surname is Masuso. I think it is the friend of Umam Primrose. And that was the only part where we heard about the Masuso sister. We don't understand, we don't get to know how did Umam Primrose and how did Sister Mega then cope with the trauma that came with losing a friend like that, because there's part that actually gets me very emotional, a part where Mam Sondi says when the police came, she turned around and covered herself with her hoodie and was waiting for the sound of a gunshot going off. And that part for me really just makes the whole thing to be so real, that what kind of trauma can someone go through and still be able to talk about after that? How did that register into their own heads that I almost died? And there was a point where I was like literally seeing my life flashing before my eyes, but still they continue to to move, and not only moving for themselves, but they also move for other people, and which is, there's something that we see on a daily basis, women putting themselves on the line for other women. But for me, I want to go back to saying that then there is a need for the caring of the carers, because if they continue to give, they're going to get to a point where they're also going to run off things to give. Because I think also part of what Mam Sondi and Sister Mega struggled was that they were each other's support system. So when Mam Sondi then moved to another place, it was not only the issue that she had moved, but it was also an issue of Mam Tumeka also felt like she was losing an emotional companion, someone who understood her on a very deeper level. So it was someone who she would actually an event would happen, but she would actually go back to Mam Sondi and talk to her about what had happened, and vent out, try to find other ways of actually dealing with tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we just mute Dr. Ntabiseng just for the time being? I'm just looking at the time, colleagues, and at the same time, I mean, this is an incredibly insightful conversation. I'm just checking to see if Dr. Ntabiseng is still here. Okay, she's still here. Okay, so I'm going to have to just give perhaps the last question, and maybe you can also just give your closing comments, perhaps. And maybe the last question should be, what for you was the most memorable scene? I mean, I was thinking one of the, Dr. Mutsima was also just talking about how children become quite central in the film itself. One of the what we see happening earlier is I think Mam Tumeka's granddaughter, when she's just drawing and just mapping the entire community, right? And she says, this is the shaft that makes our fathers sick. And she says, this is where home is, this is where school is, and this is where our fathers died. And yesterday, I remember Dr. Yanaya was talking about memory and how there's this relationship between the time of the present and the time of the past, and how we understand our location in it. And when I was watching that particular scene, I was thinking about how that relationship between past and present was really happening. And at the same time, you were talking about this intergenerational healing of which women are responsible for. And right there and there, I'm thinking Usmahle is also just grappling with what time is doing to her in the present moment. It was quite a beautiful scene, but also just troubling at the same time. So just perhaps for you and Sis Nabisa to comment on what you felt was your most memorable scene, and some closing comments.
In fact, that was the one. It was the child drawing for me as well. That really hit hard and hit home when the child would tell something like "Ilana utata betha bafela khona," and the extent of this trauma. I think it really, for me, symbolizes the extent of such traumas, the extent of which we haven't actually, being as South Africans, had the opportunity to pause and really, deal with the violence of the past, and also a way of dealing with the present violences. But what, of course, for me, why that particular one is really just hits home as well, is that it centralizes this whole concept of death, which I think also COVID has brought to the forefront as well, and how do we work through and understand notions of deaths under democracy. I think we're struggling with that. I think we still haven't even enough reflected on past deaths, on historical deaths, on even the deaths that are mentioned by one of the women, of when you go underground. The world of underground is a man's world. And what, underground deaths as well, and traumas and humiliations that have happened. Really, there's just such a spectrum of death that we haven't fully come to try and understand. And so when COVID comes, when other forms of death come, it really puts us as a people, as individuals, as communities in very precarious, and precarious here where I mean we could literally, fall and disentangle as well. So for me, it was the role of children again, that whole theme of children, which I think in the ways that we do our work, we don't feature children, and part of why I love the film as well. In fact, I was thinking, well, you know what I need to do? I need to kind of go out of this room before I start speaking and show you the kids, in the other room that I've said, shh, because that's what our theorizing, our reflections need to incorporate the noise. They need to incorporate us as we talk about humanization, being full human beings. And that's what it's about. It starts at those really small and micro levels as women who talk about other women and, who talk and write about other women and about our own lives. I think we need to start at a point of vulnerability in our theorizing as well. And so I love this term, which I've been, also thinking through, playing around of the theorist as healer. And interestingly, you're finding it a lot. Your feminists, your womanists are using that notion in quite interesting ways. If you're looking at their writings, they're writing right now. You would think that people are talking about radicalization, are talking about, be out there, do that still needs to be done. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of your so-called elders, your feminists are their work is moving very strongly within this fear of around healing, of around integrative notions of healing. And for me, of course, two things that, come from that when the young child was drawing of, two things that I'd like to challenge myself as well as fellow writers, researchers, academics out there, is we haven't centralized children in this trauma, and kind of what the role of violence has done to children. In South Africa, we talk, we edit them out in very, and the film didn't do that. The film didn't do that. The grandson of Mama Sonti was right there as she was riding, and all of that. So it's the issue for me of children. And again, we need to come to terms with the centrality of death in our lives, and how, as the questions are always said, what does it mean? What does it mean existentially, from a subjectivity point of view, an identity point of view, individual, community, nation? What does it mean when death actually was our structuring, has been for such a long time? TRC showed it. I was shocked, by the way, myself, as, ending to end of it. It was also quite shocking for me when I was, going through the film, of how it's as if it was a TRC narrative of a past violence. And so again, how we in a sense, haven't moved. And what does that mean? So many more questions, but I thought the film just did was brilliant in the way it was able to construct, as I say, what for me was a feminist, womanist ways of knowing and epistemology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Motsime. And it's just unfortunate that we don't have more time. Sis Nobisa?
Yeah, I see that. One thing that stood out for me was how we have so much work that needs to be done into ensuring that we do not repeat history, that the voices of women from 1956, we don't hear much about them. We only know a few women that were not totally erased, but we only know their names. We don't know much about the work that they have done into ensuring that we gain independence. So I'm thinking that what the film did for me was that it didn't only paint a picture of what happened in Marikana, but it also painted the daily lived experiences of women and children in Marikana, and made me to quite relate to it and want to ensure that going forward, we can't have events that happen and it just becomes an issue of an event or an incident that happened, but we are never really taken into the bottom or into the realistic way of how it happened. So for me, what stood out for me in the film was how Mam Primrose and Sis Tumeka held things together and showed that they voice out. They don't only become voices for themselves, but they become the voices of families and become voices of the women that were scattered all over Africa, like women in Mozambique, women in Lesotho, women in the Eastern Cape, that were not able to go there for themselves and understand exactly what was going on. Because there's this picture that I have that, for us who are very far from the mining sector, what we have, the imagination of what is happening in the mines is very different from what I saw on the documentary. So I'm actually very grateful that for me, Marikana is not only about the men that died there, but it is about the daily lived experiences of women and children. So I think that is something that stood out for me, and I think it is also challenging us to continue to document the lived experiences of women, and that they are not erased, and the impact that they have had is forever in our lives, and we talk about it on a daily basis, and we make references to. And basically that's what stood out for me. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sis Nobisa, and to Dr. Matseme, just for taking us through some of the themes that emerge in the film, and how women are just self-actualize and find strategies of surviving, if you like. Also, perhaps we should just say thanks to Aliki Saragas, for working with Umam Tumega and Umam Primrose to bring us this work. Thank you very much, everyone, for your engagements as well. Okay, so we are going to move into the next session, which is just a conversation between Asiphe Mqalisa from the Center for Women and Gender Studies and Noma Mdaka on her film Fortunate. Let's just see if Asiphe is here. Asiphe?
Hi, Spugazi. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm here. This session is the discussion of a film by Unoma Ndaka. The film Fortunate, which you would have watched by now, is a self-reflexive documentary film about the traumas caused by child abandonment and adoption. The story follows Unoma Thamsanqa as she reflects on her personal experiences of being abandoned as a child and finding a home through adoption. So the film takes on a poetic journey through a series of vivid images that express her inner feelings and thoughts towards her biological parents and how their rejection has actually impacted and molded her into the kind of person she is today. But before we go to the discussion, who is Unoma Thamsanqa Ndaka? Well, she is from PE in the Eastern Cape. She is currently pursuing her honors in media studies at Nelson Mandela University. Her passion lies in exploring the transgressive side of cinema and creating subjective experiences in storytelling within the world of fiction, film, and documentary filmmaking. Without wasting any time, I will now hand over to Unoma Thamsanqa Ndaka just to reflect on the film Fortunate. Over to you, Unoma Thamsanqa.
Okay, Asipe, thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. A very good afternoon to everyone. Um, the film, which is a documentary that I did on myself, which is a self-reflection about the process and the traumas that I went through as a child because of being abandoned by my biological parents and finding a home through adoption. And it's just basically me having a sit down with myself and allowing myself and creating a safe space for myself to really indulge and dive into those feelings, and how do I present myself into the world, and how has actually created my worldview about relationship regarding parents and their children. So basically, what I wanted to do with the film or the documentary was to approach it very artistically, as to not try and explain, because there's a process where I try and explain each and every uh, a process that I went through upon finding out that I was adopted or abandoned and everything. But I wanted to approach it in a very artistic way where I take the viewer in a most poetic way into tapping into the emotions that I went to. So the themes, they do not actually only involved abandonment and adoption. There are also themes that I indulge in regards to what happens when you are a girl child in a black community and you are abandoned and then now you are adopted. Even though I don't literally state this in the film, but with the imagery, you will get a sense of what I'm trying to say. Uh, the questioning of what happens when you are a girl child in a black community and now you find a home through adoption. Now you have this adoptive parent. Now, culturally, what is the effect on you on that? What in terms of uh, clan names, in terms of the bloodline, in terms of, let's say, I, Nomatamsanga, I do have a calling, but I cannot uh, heed that ancestral calling because there are certain issues that I still need to resolve, where I need to still find my background in terms of who is your parent, and the clan names that are involved in that. And also, I also take the viewer into the process of how the mind deals with trauma, and why was it possible for me to, throughout the years, uh, be able to know, even though I could not even express it as a child or growing up, how was I able to know that this home is not actually where I was born? And that those are the certain things that I question within the space that I've created while indulging with creating this documentary. So basically, that's what I wanted to tap into: the emotions, the journey, uh, the cultural aspect and the traditional aspect. How do you indulge into those spaces, especially in a black community? Because those things are very important and they're very significant, because each and every day you might go out, people will ask you about your clan name and you have to respond, even though you're going to respond, but there's always that feeling that I'm not really being truthful in my responses, because there's this thing that is uh, in your head that is saying that that's not really you. And also the fact that I was raised by a single parent also comes through, even though I don't literally say it. a single parent who is a mother who never introduced me to her ancestors. And how does that work? When I'm alone now that she has passed, who do I engage with in terms of calling upon my ancestors? You will find those themes and those topics through the imagery that I provide within the film itself. And basically, that's what I wanted to engage with. And also, the most important part was to provide therapy for myself, because I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before that it is a sit down, is it a safe place rather for me to actually heal from those things, to actually question myself about certain aspect of my life, uh, regarding the adoption and the being abandoned, and also realizing that there are certain things that I cannot change. There are certain things that I have to accept, that this is how it is, and what is the way forward. And that's basically me in the sit down trying to find a way forward. But how do I find this way forward if I don't take a few steps back and try to find out where did it all go wrong, why, and all that stuff? And if I can't find those answers, then what's the way forward? Should I just let it be and move on? And that's what I was trying to achieve. Just find that moment where I heal as a person, and I question certain things that I never had a chance to question as a child. And really, when you are adopted in black, I don't know about other families, but in a black community, adoption is not something that is widely spoken of. It is, it becomes a very hush thing. Nobody mentions anything about that. Not even an aunt or an uncle. It becomes a very private thing. And that was just me allowing myself to express that, even though those people that I wanted to address were not there. But I had to tap into that space and just allow myself to heal through that process, and allowing the camera to just keep that alive and make sure that that story has a life of its own. Basically, that's what I wanted to address within it. I hope I didn't waste too much time trying to explain or reflect on this film, and I hope everyone understands.
Thank you so much, Norma, for trusting the space and for sharing your reflections. Colleagues, just to note that you can actually comment and ask Norma questions on the chat section. So from my side, Norma, while watching your movie, or perhaps I should say film, while watching your film, I saw that there's a dire need for adoption trauma to be addressed constructively, along with addressing abandonment and attachment issues to help with the readjustment process in a healthier manner. Perhaps whilst doing the film, did you find in any way a helpful journey of healing as you were speaking about healing? And interestingly, because in the previous session, we spoke about healing and how healing is a longer process, but not a one-time process. Can you please try and enlighten us on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Wonderful question. Healing is, it's, as you've just stated, it's a process. I can't say that I've fully healed. Like, you would say that I'm in the process. Just tell yourself it's a process, and I have to take these necessary steps. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I know the direction that I want to take. I don't want to be have this shadow upon me whenever I go, or whenever someone asks me about my clan name. Then it becomes a trigger that, oh, I have these certain issues that I haven't resolved. So just for clarity, I've never, like as I stated, we've never sat down as a family. We even upon knowing, I've never even went and consult a psychologist or clinical psychologist for that matter. And why I also had to question why I did not open myself to that process. And I found that attachment issues, having to find that safe place. Am I in a state where I can fully trust you with this information? Am I in the space mentally to, or are you also in the space mentally to understand what I'm trying to address? So healing, it takes numerous journeys. It's not a one-way street. My healing was taking up a camera and pressing record and just stating the process and what I went through, and also having to think creative, because thinking creatively about it is what helped me throughout telling the story. Because if I had to sit in front of a psychologist or a family member, probably I would have felt silent long ago. I wouldn't have been able to express that. Listen, I've known since forever that I come from this place, even though I don't have the full details. So that was my process, and I'm so grateful that I'm in the space that I'm in within filmmaking, that I was able to find my healing within that space. So it's not a one-way street. You have to find your space that you can just heal as a person. That's just what I would say. Just find your own way. There are numerous ways that can make you comfortable as a person, where you can just simply state what you want to state and address what you want to address, so that you heal. N- I don't want to say necessarily heal as in completely heal, because it really takes time. Because in my mind, I thought I would once have the courage to address it, even though I knew my mom didn't have all the details of what happened and all that. She knew her story and what happened before that she doesn't know. But I also wanted, maybe there's something that she knows, maybe I can have the courage to go there. But she passed away. I have to heal through her passing. And now I'm also in this space where you find that you struggling spiritually and culturally. There are certain things that other family members cannot help you to perform, because you still it's a process, especially as I said, within the Black community. It's really a it's a process, and it really needs to be addressed on how we go about integrating the children who come from the system of being abandoned and being adopted. How do you integrate those kids into your families, as in introducing them to your ancestors, making sure that they are shielded spiritually, even though you're going to shield them financially, and gonna provide them with love and care and all that. But the most important thing for me, and what I did not fully understand, why wasn't I was not shielded spiritually. And now it's coming back as an adult, and I can't go forward without having to fix those things that the adults do, and I don't even know why they did it. So going back to healing, it's a process, because you have to deal with certain things. They're all always curveballs in your journey, that you just have to fix this, and then you go to another a space, and then you have to heal, fix that. So it's a process, it's a long journey. And I hope I do find a space where I can say I have healed. But in this lifetime, I think you just get used to it. In this lifetime, I don't think you can really heal. You just get used to it, and you learn to live. Even though there will be someone maybe that or whoever who's going to explain, oh, actually, the reason why I left or I did this to you is because you're gonna find those answers, and then what? Because it's not gonna erase the fact that it happened, and it happened in such a manner that it happened. Like it's very traumatic. Like there also like okay, I was just answering the healing part, so I'll just leave the other part. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Norma. I'll just
Thank
go to the chat section just to read out some of the comments that are there in questions. And also just to say that I admire how you are telling your story from a position of power.
thank you so much.
Sipoka Zidau says, thanks, Norma. I think that idea of home being fluid, I think of the idea of home being fluid, but importantly, not being able to provide a sense of certainty and stability, and how you're still grappling with such questions. Your film took me on such a journey of thinking through place and identity. And I think she was also referring to the discussion that you just spoke about spiritually being displaced and struggling spiritually. So Besh is saying adoption used to be a very taboo subject in the Indian community too. Yes, and they're still struggling with the LGBT community and adoption as well in India. Siskoliswa is saying this young woman is brave. I just want to hold her. Virtual hugs to you. There's another comment as well, which I think is the last one, so that you can respond. From Supesh saying, Norma, thank you for speaking about the significance of your direct address to the camera as a way of outwardly working through your thoughts and emotions. I personally loved how your moments of contemplation via direct address are interspersed with images of what you are feeling, remembering, and seeing in your inner world. You've really pushed the healing potential of the medium in this regard. I'll just give over to you to respond to the comments, and then we'll take other comments after.
Oh wow. I I don't know how to respond to such incredible, nice, encouraging comments. I become very shy in that aspect. But thank you so much that people were able to receive the message, because sometimes I go all crazy and become artistic about my lecturer, who's my supervisor now, will tell you, Subesh. She once called me into her office and like, Norma, what are you trying to say? Because I become so artistic in my filmmaking that sometimes I won't even know what direction that I want to take, but there's that thing that is pulling me towards this certain tone about the film, about the imagery that I want to portray. And I want to thank her and everyone who commented upon the film and also getting the message. And because I was also a bit worried about the direct address, because it might seem a little bit YouTube boring and all that stuff. But I had to allow myself that moment where I have to sit down and address myself, because it was me addressing myself rather other than or addressing the other. It was just me reflecting upon these emotions. And also I also again thank my lecturer for pushing me in the artistic direction side of things, uh, in terms of the salient themes that are they're not literal but very figurative in meaning, and it's very wide. You can take whatever approach that you or approach and meaning that you can find to it, because I don't want to box people, in terms of their meaning making when it comes to watching films. That's my main point. Even though I will tell you the story, but in terms of how I drive it forward with the images, I don't want to spoon feed you too much that you don't get a moment within yourself to think beyond what I'm telling you or what I'm showing you. So I thank each and everyone for picking that up, because it's not a very easy thing to do, especially if you're not trained within the film space. And also, just thank you, and thank you for sitting down with me today. And you have this beautiful calming voice, so thank you, because I was shaking at first. I'm like, whoo. So thank you for your beautiful calming voice, and I really appreciate the space that you guys have opened up for us, and just sharing our experiences with you. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Nomatamsanqa. Again, siyabulela for trusting the space. And thank you so much, colleagues, for engaging with Nomatamsanqa. Continue being brave, and thank you for telling your story from a position of power. I wish you well in your healing process. Colleagues, due to time, we are running late. I will now hand over to Swazi Tau, who will take us through to the next section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asipe and Nomatamsanqa. And thanks, colleagues, for the engagement. I see the engagement is still continuing in the chat section, and we'd like to keep it that way. So colleagues are free to always just keep on engaging. I'm just going to ask Tech to please bring Sihle Hlophe from the attendees into the panelist section. While we do that, I'm going to read Sihle's bio. Can we bring Sihle Hlophe into the panelists? She's in the attendees. And while we're still at it, can we allow Sihle the ability to share her screen? So let's please make her a co-host so she can have, we can enable her sharing screen abilities. Okay. All right, we're moving into the next session, colleagues, which is a workshop by Usihle. I'm just going to read Sihle's bio as she prepares to present. Sihle Hlophe is an award-winning filmmaker and a multi-degree earner. Hlophe is currently developing 2 feature fiction films for nationwide theatrical release. She is the producer and director of the upcoming feature-length documentary, Lobola, A Bride's True Price. She has worked as a scriptwriter on popular TV programs such as Lockdown, Scandal, and Mutual Friends. Hlophe has 35 film festivals around the Hlophe has narrated short films and has screened over 35 films around the world. She's also the founder of Passion Seed Communications, a for-profit social enterprise that develops social impact films and campaigns for underserved audience members. Sihle, before you start, I'm just going to read just a brief summary of your workshop. Before you speak to that, Sihle's workshop is called Work Readiness Bootcamp. It is designed for film students, graduates, and job seekers who want to find work in the South African film and TV industry. It is aimed at closing the gap between the employer's expectations of the skills and knowledge of new entrants and the actual levels of professionalism and awareness of the new entrants. It also equips participants with the tools they need to secure and retain employment opportunities. Thank you so much for joining us, Sihle. The platform is yours.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of this great initiative. So I'll just get right into it so that I can try and get as much information in as possible. But I'd also like the session to be very interactive. So we'll start off with me showing you a video of mine, which is a summarized version of the workshop that we do, which usually takes over a day. And then after conducting the workshop, we can then discuss next possible steps, especially if you're a film student or if you're a job seeker or someone who's been in the job market for a while and is trying to get into the film industry. So, are you seeing the video?
This lesson or class video
That's correct.
is specifically targeted at young people. I'm talking about film graduates, aspiring filmmakers, unemployed young people, job seekers, whatever you choose to call yourselves. If you're young and you want to get into the job market, this video is specifically for you. I hope that the information that I'm going to give you is going to be useful. So if you're sitting at home and you're sitting with your degree or your diploma or certificate,
Sihle, can you hear me? Sihle, can you hear me? It appears that we've lost just the audio of your video.
I do not want to see an old school
It's
CV.
back. Okay.
These are 6 tips that I have for you, right? So number 1, CV preparation. It's 2020 and you're a young person. I expect you to use graphic design software to do your CV. It's also a visual medium, so I expect you to be savvy in that regard and present yourself in that way, put your best foot forward. The software that I recommend is Canva, C-A-N-V-A, right? Canva, there are lots and lots of CV templates that you can use on Canva. That can help you to have a presentable CV. I do not want to see an old school CV that's black and white, written in Times New Roman. No, guys, find a way to present yourself in the best way possible. And have a short version and a long version because people will ask for different versions. Another question you might be asking about CV preparation is, Sihle, I have nothing to put on my CV. I only have my degree, I've never worked. Well, get volunteer experience, shadow people on set, upskill. It's going to
Sihle, I think your audio is off again. I think you have to ensure that you don't unmute your mic.
as we go along, but just find ways to do this and read up on it online. The name of that website is Canva, C-A-N-V-A, and you can design a beautiful CV accordingly and stand out from the rest of the crowd and all the other ugly CVs that are out there. Number 2, polish your interview skills. There are interview do's and don'ts. There's interview etiquette. There's a way that you need to carry yourself. Confidence, assertiveness, professionalism. These are things that you can read up about. You can watch videos where there are actual interview scenarios that are played out and, just practice. Practice makes perfect. But be yourself. Don't over-rehearse. What I've seen a lot of the times, one of the tips I'll give you is research the company, research the production company, know the content that they create. Don't speak badly about the content, about anyone's content for that matter. And humble yourself, be willing to learn, be eager, be enthusiastic, and firm handshake, be on time. Ask around where the taxis are to get to that place so that you're not late for your interview and you don't blow your chances. Also, dress appropriately. Just because it's the film and television industry doesn't mean you must rock up in dirty sneakers and raggedy clothes. We are still expected to present ourselves professionally and to look the part, so make sure that all that is on point. Don't ever take that for granted, right? Groom yourself accordingly. My third tip would be personal branding. So clean up all your social media platforms. Like I said, I'm all about expressing your sexuality or your body positivity politics and all that, but make sure that it's curated in such a way that it's also obvious that you're interested in becoming a filmmaker. I want to see you behind the camera. I want to see you on stage, even if it's a student production. Just show that this is the image I'm trying to portray. Why do I say this? A lot of people are recruiting online now. That's where people find jobs. That's where people find each other. That's where people connect. Online is a job market. So social media cannot be negated. And you can't just say, that's my social media. That's got nothing to do with my professional. Maybe, yes, there is some truth in that, but social media also says a lot about how you want the world to perceive you. Also make sure that you have your show reel in order. There are many free editing programs online, so there's no excuse for you to not have a show reel. If you want to be a writer, have your writing samples, all the things that you might be asked for. That also includes your biography, your filmography, what documents do you need as a filmmaker that say stuff about you, that speak about you. And again, there are many templates online. My fourth one would be upskill. So there are two very reputable online resources for free courses. Okay, not always free. There's Udemy and there's Coursera. There's many others, right? Including the New York Film Academy, where you can pay for courses. So maybe you can do a 16-week writing course or a 3-week acting course online. Some of them are free, some of them are not. If you're looking for the free ones, I'd really encourage you to study digital marketing. I'd really encourage you to also study project management and study other aspects of filmmaking that you are not confident about, and see how many you can get free or pay, but a limited amount. And this will also help you to beef up your CV. Also upskill by learning software like Photoshop, Adobe, all these things are helpful. Even Canva, like if a young person knows Canva really well, that helps the company a lot, Number 5 would be look for free opportunities. Firstly, by signing up to online industry publications such as Screen Africa, such as Call Sheets, such as Vansa. You can also join industry organizations, industry bodies such as the Writers Guild of South Africa, the Documentary Filmmakers Association, Swift Sisters working in film and television. They also have regular newsletters, but their social media platforms are also a plug for opportunities. And if you do this, then you'll get job alerts about training opportunities and other things, finding opportunities as well. So be plugged into industry publications. And also know that in the corporate world, even organizations that have nothing to do with film, also you can talk to them about shooting corporate videos for them, about creating content for them, collaborating with them, but also they have enterprise development programs that you can partake in as a small business, as a small production company, where you learn lots of business skills. I'll point out Race Corp for now, Shanduka Black Umbrellas. There's quite a few enterprise development programs that you can look into that will help your emerging production company or just help you with your own business skills, because as a filmmaker, you are a business after all. Number 6, international opportunities. So you can also study abroad. I mean, the National Arts Council and the Department of Arts and Culture, the National Film and Video Foundation, they all offer scholarships for filmmakers who want to study abroad. There are also other scholarship programs, thousands of them across the world, including the Fulbright scholarship program to study in the United States. I know that in Germany, there are a lot of free scholarships that are readily available. So look into that as well, because then it puts you one step above the crowd and it gives you that international exposure. And there are also international funding opportunities for African filmmakers, like the IDFA Bertha Fund, the Hot Docs Fund, and those sometimes come with international training programs with free flights and free accommodation and free training. And my other tips would be, so those are my 6. If I can recap, I say make sure that you've prepared your CV properly so that it stands out from the crowd. Polish your interview skills. Make sure that your personal branding is on point. Skill up. Get free courses or ones that reasonable. Number 5, look for free opportunities from industry publications and industry bodies. And number 6, look for international opportunities. Now, what other tips do I have for you quickly before I go? I'd say look into the NFVF's website. That's such a huge resource for us as filmmakers, because there you'll find out about their Sadiba training programs for scriptwriters and directors. You'll find out about that female filmmaker slates, youth filmmaker slates. You'll find out about funding opportunities that they have, how to attend film festivals and markets for free. So the NFVF has a lot of resources, and the most important one for you guys is that they have an internship program. So you sign up for that internship program and they place you at a production company, or you work within the NFVF itself. So please look into that. And then also look into other organizations that have internship programs, other production companies. Look up their details online, whichever production companies you'd like to work for, and then email them and ask them, do you have an internship program? Can I be an intern? Get the conversation going, and hopefully you get a response there. Number 2, there's the multi-choice talent factory, which is for young people as well. The details are all online, and you can get, training opportunities there, and also get to, work on real sets. So that's great, and then it plugs you into the job market quite easily. If you're a young person and you inbox me and you say, please read my script, you might be the 100th young person, or please can I work for you? Right? So rather send me an email, it's more professional, or come to an industry organization event, a networking event. So if you've joined Swift, come to a Swift event, come to a DFA event. It will be easy and more organic to network with people that you've always admired, to get into contact with potential employers. So join those organizations. I know that it's costly, but sometimes you can negotiate and ask if I can pay in installments. Can I pay 100 rands a month over 3 months? Can I do something for you, maybe some research in exchange for membership? So negotiate with the industry bodies to see how you can join them. I'd also say, if you are not in Johannesburg at the moment and you are in another province and you're thinking there's no industry here, look to your local government. So look to registering yourself as a service provider so you can shoot government events. There's a government event every day of the week. Look at shooting weddings, even funerals, birthdays. All these things help you to generate some kind of income while you're waiting for your chance, but also you're filling up your CV in this time. I'd say that YouTube is a huge resource. Some people they've argued they don't need to go to film school because they studied everything they need to know on YouTube. If you have data, I say use YouTube. Data is a challenge. See if your local municipality has a library or something where you can get free data. There's also some data sponsorship programs that have started emerging now, where people are donating data to young people. So just keep an eye out for that. I'd say look into getting a driver's license. It's also costly, but production will move around a lot, and if you're a young person, you probably can't assist, and that means driving. So having a license is very useful. Also connect with your existing networks. Some of the people you went to film school with, some of your lecturers, check in with them again. Have your samples ready at all time, your writing samples, your show reels, all those things must be readily available. Create content now. Now is a good time, especially with COVID. People are sitting at home, bums on eyes on screens. You can monetize on that content. You can possibly even attract the attention of a potential employer who's on YouTube. I see people using TikTok as well to create content, so that's really good. It shows that this person is burning to create, they're passionate, they've got talent, they can do it. So like I said, meet me halfway. Do not just sit there and think, oh, this is such a helpless situation. Oh, there's nothing I can do. Oh, until I find a job. Oh, meet me halfway. What's nice about our industry is that you can create content from wherever you are. Right now, I'm filming myself. I could actually have a whole talk show. I mean, I start getting ideas, but you get what I mean. I'm also writing a lot, doing a lot of developmental work. So whether there's money or not, we are able to create, we're able to work. But do think about yourself as a business and have a good relationship with money. And don't give up on yourself. Don't let the current economic situation drain you and become something that is discouraging to you as you look for employment. Don't give up. Your chance is coming, opportunity is coming, it's gonna happen. But just keep showing up for yourself and network. Be on the lookout, and yeah, things will come together. And prepare yourself. Prepare yourself to show up as the highest version of yourself when you finally get that opportunity that you've been dying to get.
Okay. I'm back.
Pardon, this morning we're in conversation with Jackie Pamot.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. You just have to unmute your video.
I did. Oh, okay. Start my video. Cool. All right. So before I go any further, I'd like to know if there are any questions. Should I check in the chat? Yeah, do we have any questions from any of the participants so far?
I'm just checking with you. Colleagues can at this stage raise their hands for any comments, questions. Okay, I think you can continue so long, Sihle.
Okay, cool. So I did really want it to be quite interactive. So I wanted to find out if we do have any like young filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers that are with us. Okay, but hopefully then they can watch this presentation maybe at a later stage. So what I'd like to go into now is sort of the type of things that I had said in the video, but I'll just reiterate a few of those points again. So I feel like for young people, they need to know from the onset, like when the hunt begins, they need to know, do I want to be a full-time employee? What does that mean? Do I want to be self-employed, or do I want to be a freelancer or an independent filmmaker? Because those are all different. Or do I want to mix any of those? And if I do, what are the implications? So if I'm a full-time employee, maybe the benefits are that I pay lower tax, I have a fixed salary and a fixed schedule. Maybe I'm working at a SOPI. I have certain company benefits, but I might lack creative freedom. I might feel stagnant. I might feel like my time is owned by somebody else. If I am self-employed, that also becomes something that I think a lot of young people might need to look into, especially in the current economy, registering their companies with CPRO and going into enterprise development programs like Shinduka Black Umbrellas, Raise Corp, Expert Hub, and so on, so that they can develop their business acumen while waiting for opportunities, whether they get commissioned or find themselves in the workplace. At least they have something that can also keep going in the meantime. And I mean, the cons of that would be obviously the financial instability, no paid leave, having more responsibility, and obviously lack of access to markets and limited funding, lack of entrepreneurial know-how. But that's why I've suggested the enterprise development programs, because those are usually open to all sectors. If they go into freelancing, which is working for various production companies across various genres, sometimes at the same time, operating like a one-man business where they have to do their own personal branding, their own admin, invoicing, contracts, tax, and so forth. And you find that a lot of young adults born in the 90s and the 80s have driven significant growth in the freelance market. And the numbers of freelancers aged between 26 and 29 has risen by over 66% since 2008. So there is a rise in that market. And now we're also in this pandemic where we're sitting at home and we're working virtually. So we find ourselves also working for different clients, you know, and providing services like that. So I guess that's another thing that young people need to look into. And the pros of that is obviously being paid daily rates, the freedom to choose the clients and control your workload, control your time, and get exposure to a lot of different production companies. But on the cons, We have higher taxes, which is now 25%, unpredictable workflow, no fixed salary, no employee benefits like medical aid and maternity leave, isolation, working alone a lot, hard to get car and home loans. So again, those are things that you need to weigh up. And I'd say another one that's quite popular would be the independent filmmaker. This is pursuing long-term projects, mainly documentaries and feature films, which are meant for film festivals, SVOD platforms. They can go across the spectrum, TV, whatever. Look at people like your Jamils, your Akims, your Eva DuVernays, your Wanarus, your Spike Lees. These people make a living with funding grants and selling their films across different platforms. They are known as the voices or the auteurs, and they're known to be brave and do subversive experimental work. And you have to have a lot of commercial viability in order to, position yourself like this. And again, you face similar risks as being an independent contractor because of these funding gaps that are there. On one of the plus sides is that you get to travel extensively. And usually you'd have a production company, but you're not functioning fully only as an entrepreneur, but there's a creative element to that as well. So those are some of the things that you need to look into very early, like what kind of creature am I? Am I comfortable rather, working full-time at SABC, or am I the type of person who wants to be more like a Spike Lee? And there's no lesser journey, but it's just about knowing yourself or trying a variety of them out and then learning to know what works for you and what doesn't, or maybe which ones overlap, which ones can you combine, and so forth. I'd say, again, this is the age of the slasher. So / content creator / freelancer / YouTuber. This becomes more attractive to employers. It means that you can have reduced labor costs and you can work remotely. And again, for you, it means multiple streams of income. So you could be doing social media for one company while you're creating short content videos for another, while you actually write scripts for another. And, so the disadvantage obviously is being known as a jack of all trades, but there are people who've found a way to balance these things. And I'd say for most companies now, these are the kind of young people that they want to hire so that they can help them with different things. And again, to prepare for the hunt, you need to have professional, appropriate photos of yourself, because these will be needed for your bio. These will be needed for your CV, your social media. You need to define your personal brand and communicate that you're an aspiring filmmaker who's very passionate. You need to clean up your social media, like I said. CV templates that are on Canva, I also have a few that I can share with people who are looking for CV templates that are more modern. Again, join LinkedIn. I say this to a lot of young people. Start joining LinkedIn at an early stage and start adding producers, production companies, production managers. These are the people who scout online to hire people. So you need to be out there as well. So my strategy will always be integrated. It will always include like a digital element to it. It won't just be go and knock on the doors of production companies, especially now in the time of COVID, where everything has gone largely online and we don't even know when we will be back in our offices again. Again, when we talk about hunting, you want to hunt like a pro. I've spoken about LinkedIn. I've spoken about social media. Again, on social media, it's not here's my script, please read my script. Let's start following each other, commenting on each other's work, build a relationship organically, and then, take it from there, and then go to DM, which probably goes to emails. But let's be professional. Let's not infringe on people's privacy and people's time, because that might have the opposite effect. I do believe, again, that joining an agency like Crew Cuts is also another option for young people. Even though they take a commission, at least then you know that you're on someone's books. Again, phone calls, cold calls, that's a traditional old school way. I would still try that. Door-to-door campaigning, like I said, I'm not a big fan of it, but there are a lot of people who can say, I've done it. I went from production company to production company and it worked for me. Newspapers and online classifieds, these would be better for if you're in a different province. So if you're in Mpumalanga, if you're in Northwest, if you're in the Eastern Cape, and you're looking for maybe tenders or opportunities to film government events, to film corporate events, then you might want to look at your newspapers. Networking and industry events now, because of the pandemic, they're a bit limited, but still join those industry bodies and see how you can organically build relationships with people that can be your future employers. Volunteer at these industry bodies as well, volunteer at production companies. I'm not saying get exploited. I'm saying that at least have something on your CV. So it's a thin line, you know, but I'd say rather have, I've shadowed here, I've done this there, than to have nothing at all. Again, the industry publications, every week they will release opportunities. So you have to be on the lookout for that. And you can even set alerts so that you know when they come out and you're the first one to see them. And there are also social media groups like SA Film and TV Crew, TV and film production jobs. Those kind of groups, especially on Facebook, always have opportunities being posted on them, and they have thousands of followers. So that's another way to just keep yourself on the lookout. And if you'd ask me what makes you employable, I'd say number one, I wrote here geek in inverted commas, but what I mean by that is that you, to the extent that you can, obviously, have to try and be technically savvy. Because 1 minute we're on social media, the next we're working with Adobe, the next we're on Canva, the next we're on Photoshop or whatever. So as a young person, you know, be flexible and teach yourself how to work with these softwares. A lot of them are online, a lot of them you can download for free. So by the time that me and you come together, you are adding value to my production company, because you say, oh, I can sort this out for you very quickly. Oh, I can do this, I can do Adobe, I can do that. So make sure you meet me there. Being confident, I mean, that's something we all have to work on. And obviously it begins with a lot of internal work. But I think if you exude confidence and that you can do the job that you've been hired to do, that also makes your employer feel reassured. But, you know, you must distinguish between confidence and arrogance, especially as a young person starting out in the industry. You have to be a team player, because we work with crews, we work with cast members. So it's a team sport. You know, even the editor has to work with people. So that has to be one of your skills. You have to be a quick learner. One day we're shooting a documentary, the next day it's a reality show, the next day, you know, so you have to be adaptable and have that mindset that, what is this? Show me, let me figure it out. Let me wrap my head around it. You know, don't be closed-minded, because things are constantly changing and we're constantly growing in this industry. Problem solver, problems happen all the time. Oh, somebody's not answering their phone. We've lost the light. We can't shoot there, it's raining, it's too bright. All these things happen, and they happen like this when we're shooting. So you can't have a fixed mindset. So you have to be the person that says, oh, I saw another location there, there's a shade, we can shoot there. Or, oh, I've got an extra battery on me. Oh, here's a light. Or let me quickly go get that. Because then you're really adding value. Being emotionally intelligent, I mean, that's not something we can talk about like in such a short period of time. But in our more extensive workshop, we go into those things like your conflict resolution, assertiveness, and so forth. These are also important in the workplace, and unfortunately, there is no real syllabus for them at film school. So you find yourself getting out there into the real world like, whoa, what is going on? So I think learn about the human condition, study the human condition, because even working with actors, working with different crew members, people are egotistical, others are insecure, others are overly assertive, others are, you know, so knowing all these things will help you, and it will help you navigate the different states, working with different people that you meet all the time. And lastly, I think being a great communicator, because like I said, we're on the go. We need this, we need that, we need it now. And we need to know what is happening and why it's happening, why is it not happening, what needs to happen. So, that throat chakra, open it up, because that's a big part of being in this industry. And then I'd look into skills that I'd say that you must have. And I feel that these are skills that you can also acquire as you're sitting at home and you're waiting for employment opportunities, because a lot of the time people think, oh, I'll get the skill when I start working, when I get hired. And when is that when? I want you to meet me halfway. I keep saying this in the video. So content strategy, a lot of the times when we hire young people, we expect them to help us with our online. So, you need to be savvy about content strategy, and not just for the company's page, but for your own pages as well, because that's how you get yourself out there. Project management, there's so many courses, because when you look at production and the different production processes, ultimately it's project management. And if I'm sitting at home not knowing when I will get across another employment opportunity, then I'll be on Coursera trying to find out about project management. Basic accounting, we do cost reports, we do recons of receipts, we handle budgets. So that's a very good skill to have. That you might be introduced to at film school, but maybe not get into great detail about. Presentation skills, because you need to pitch, you need to preach to broadcasters, you need to pitch to funders, you need to, how are you going to get money to tell your story if you don't know how to speak? So that is, if you have a fear of speaking, it's something you need to try and overcome, because in order to tell your stories, you need to get money and you need to raise money. And how do you raise money? By pitching. Basic public relations. Again, you have to promote your films across different platforms. Go for TV interviews. There's all kinds of things that you need to juggle that include more than just being a filmmaker. Personal branding we spoke about. Networking skills are very important. For example, if you do get an opportunity to go to an international film festival, you really want to be the type of person that can leverage and build networks, and not be like, wallpaper, or not make real connections that could be helpful in the future. And social consciousness. I mean, we're filmmakers, we need to know what is going on in the world around us, what are the socially relevant issues, what is the plight that, that people are complaining about or rallying up against or for, or whatever. So these are things that you need to be on the lookout for. Generally, these are just skills and competencies that you'd also need to have in addition to what you learned at school. And then quickly, let me go into CV do's and don'ts. So CV, curriculum vitae, means story of your life, right? But you do need to customize it for each and every job application. You need to make it visual and you need to use clear, uncluttered layouts. You need to check spelling and grammar. I mean, this can be such a put off. It sounds so simple, but it can really turn off a potential employer and you can lose amazing opportunities. Use positive language, launched, coordinated, motivated, words like that, doing words. Place important information up front. If you've won a student award, let me know. I want to know that I'm dealing with the award-winning student filmmaker, at least, for example. Put your experience and your educational achievements in reverse chronological order. Update your CV regularly. I would even suggest certain fonts, certain size of fonts. I'd say send it as a PDF, because again, you don't want people to change the information around. And then leverage on your skills to compensate for your inexperience. So you might not have a whole bunch of shows, but you can say, I have these skills. I know how to work with Adobe. I know how to work with Canva. I'm good with social media. I also have done a project management course. This already gives you a competitive edge over other young people who are just saying, please hire me. Here's my degree, right? And again, treat your extracurricular activities like jobs, essentially. So if you're volunteering at church, that speaks to something about you. That's a skill that you've learned. Or you're the bookkeeper for your Stockfell, or you're the videographer for weddings at, in your local community or whatever. So find a way to frame that in such a way that I can see that this adds value. Yes, this young person might not have experience, but look, they are really trying. that's what I want to get, from you when I'm reading your CV. I'll go into show reels. With show reels, you have to be honest about your involvement. You can't just put like the river on your show reel and you are the production assistant, but you don't state that, Montages are unnecessary. I want to know what you did. We were the writer or you were the cinematographer and how you did it. Don't hang on to footage because you're emotionally attached to it. If it's not good, get rid of it. Watch examples of other show reels online and ask the production companies for permission first before you use their footage, and make sure that you update your show reel like maybe every 6 months and back it up on a hard drive, maybe on 2, and keep them in separate locations because you don't want to lose your work. Then I'll quickly go to slaying the interview. For you to slay the interview, I'd say these are the most important do's: dressing the part, speaking eloquently, clearly, bringing your notes with you. You don't have to have them in front of you, but you need to know, do your research, know as much as possible about the production company. Don't just make it about you. This is what I want. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to write. This is Chedza Media. I know that you do the river. And because you do the river, what I love most about that is you guys were nominated for an Emmy. And because of that, so the more research you do, the better, because it shows that you also have an interest in us as much as we have an interest in you. Get directions beforehand. I know a lot of you maybe are using taxis, so you don't want that to become an obstacle. So you might need to go there the day before, a couple of days before with the taxi, just to rehearse that taxi run, or you might just want to add an extra hour buffer just so that if anything happens, you're not late. Treat everyone with respect, from the cleaner. If you think you're going to disregard the cleaner when you're walking into the production company and be nice to the producer, then that's not good, because you have to treat everyone equally. And I might turn around to the cleaner and say, Sister Sophia, how was that young person who came in earlier? So that just goes to show respect as well. Write a thank you note after the interview. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it, particularly this and that. Don't make it a long thing, but just something short so they remember you. Ask intelligent questions about the company, and this can only happen by doing thorough research. And then bring a notepad and extra copies of your CV and show reel just in case you need them. There are other things that I would have loved to go into, like values and ethics, diversity, inclusion, and so forth. But due to time constraints, I'm just going to wrap up by talking about the final steps that I suggest that you take while you're sitting at home and waiting for that. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you. I know also you are also held with time. So what I'm going to do is I just want to bring in just the comments, and then I will let you wrap up holistically. Okay. So one of the questions were coming from Olwetu, but you've actually dealt with it, but I'm going to read it still. She was asking, what are the chances of young graduates getting work in big productions? Is work experience valued more than skills and talent in the industry? And you did speak quite extensively to that. Another comment coming in from, I think it's Dr. Babalwa. It's interesting that you mentioned mostly social skills and mainly work ethic being detailed, reliability. I've seen many intelligent graduates who struggle to work even with great concepts. What are we missing here? Thanks for your presentation. And just one more here coming, in the age where creators are now using, digital platforms like TikTok, like YouTube to create their content, and short films as well. Can you just speak maybe quite briefly there in terms of the legalities of protecting your work, especially from bigger productions, or that could take some of your ideas and work? Yeah.
Okay. Let me start with that one of protecting your work. Right now, what I know is we have the Writers Guild of South Africa. They charge 150 for the first year for their script registry, and then thereafter it's 50 rands a year to protect your work in that way. There are also other ways like emailing it to yourself, but we've seen that it's proven to be futile sometimes. So that, I guess that's another discussion for another day. But I would encourage people to monetize their content on YouTube, but also encourage them to not let that paralyze them, because ultimately there are 9 stories, you know, and it's just a matter of how we keep retelling those stories. So I've also found that sometimes that cripples people. But don't just send out your ideas to people, you know, first ask, what are they looking for? Do they need script or whatever? And then take the conversation from there, you know? So you also have to be like smart in that way, to not just be emailing people your concepts. Now we intelligent graduates, yes, we are definitely missing the soft skills. And that's what the work readiness bootcamp focuses on. We do need those soft skills. We do need your conflict resolution, assertiveness, emotional intelligence, and a whole lot of others that I could mention, because again, it would spill over into issues like your harassment, bullying, sexual harassment, and so forth, because you'd also need to know how to deal with that, especially in this industry. So I guess that's why we started the Film and TV Work Readiness Bootcamp, because we realized that there were a lot of people that were amazing on paper, but when we met with them, we realized that there was still a lot of work to be done, and we can't blame the film schools. There's just no time in the syllabus for this. But I mean, I'd suggest get on YouTube, because YouTube, you find videos about a whole lot of these things. If not, I mean, we partner with the University of Johannesburg, but I'm more than willing to take the conversation online if you're an educator and want to find out more about the bootcamp. And then just to wrap up, I'd say the most important steps if you're sitting at home and you need employment is, number 1, do you have a driver's license? I know that it's expensive, but in production, you'll find that production assistants who have driver's license will have an advantage over you, and then, you know, they'll get more jobs. And I know structural inequalities and everything, it's very unfortunate. Number 2, I mean, make sure that you always have, you already have these things, a personal bank account, personal email address, sign up for the online newsletters, volunteer and join the industry bodies, register for internship programs like the NFVF internship program, get as many free online courses and training programs as possible, and get your tax number. You know, make sure that your ID is also in order, and even your passport if it's possible, because you never know where production could take you. And I think those are things that you can also do while you're sitting at home and you're waiting for that next employment opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sihle. And I'm also just wondering if it would be okay with you. We are streaming this and recording this, you know, Prof. Subeshni, for her to perhaps share this with her classes and some of the other emerging filmmakers who couldn't make it today. But also your content is on YouTube, so we'll definitely share that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been incredibly insightful. I know that you have to go to another appointment in a few minutes, so we will allow you now time to leave and get ready for that. So thank you so much.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, colleagues, I'm looking at the program and we are nearing the end of the program. It's been quite an insightful day, quite packed with a lot of information as well, and quite an important workshop there by Sihle. I'm going to now bring Dr. Babalwa Makoqwana to the platform just to close the festival for us. Dr. Babalwa.
We've been doing Zoom for a long time, but it seems like every time we have to start, from video and all sorts of things. Anyway, colleagues, thank you so much for the past 3 days. You've been amazing. The people who have attended this film festival, but I think mostly what I would like to do is just to thank Usisixoliso Sithole, an award-winning documentary maker who has approached us with Upumla Gola, our research professor in the Center for Women in Gender Studies, to bring you this wonderful gender film festival. Obviously, the virtual nature of it, it makes it a little bit tricky, but we are happy with what has transpired, and we are hoping that we can have a bigger one, when all of this pandemic, hopefully it's going to be over soon, so that we don't miss out on actually meeting the beautiful panelists and the filmmakers and the producers who've been here. So I would like to thank Osistroliswa for bringing your work to us. She is one of the leading members of Yanaya, and also she's the director of the Standing on Their Shoulders, the film that we watched yesterday, and that was discussed by Dr. Danai Mupotsa and Nebakazi Manzi. So I'd like to thank all the panelists, Professor Subeshini Modley for giving us a masterclass, also from Media and Communications here at Mandela. Shamila Sidad, the director of Whispering Truth to Power. Yelokazi Mfuto, who was reflecting on Whispering Truth to Power. Oluwethu Manzi, who shot and directed a self-reflective film, the roles on anxieties of being a woman in South Africa due to GBV. Bongiwe, yesterday she provided a very beautiful dialogue as well about film industry in a masterclass. Aliki Saragas, obviously we just watched the film this morning, You Strike a Rock. Obviously, our very own research associate at the Center for Women and Gender Studies, Dr. Ntabiseng Motseme. It's always lovely to have you here. And we always look forward to sharing and breaking bread with you. And definitely, Nwabisa, we enjoyed the interactive conversation in the dialogue there with Dr. Museme. Nawatamsa Mdaka, the director of the film Fortunate, I think watching the bravery in that film and the intelligence on that camera. Thank you so much for telling your story. And obviously Usihle, who just finished with the workshop right now, mostly targeting our young graduates and students. To all the facilitators, Betunana, and moderators during the past 3 days, thank you, thank you, thank you. Professor Kona, we can't say thank you enough for helping us to bring this whole thing together. And the CWGS team, the IC team, ICT, Angus Noponso, and I know that Nomta is behind the scenes, Spokazi, Asipe, Jubase, Wendy, all of you, and Hlengiwe, all of you Gender Center people, you make this thing happen. And also I would like to thank the National Film and Video Foundation as our partners for this festival. And obviously the HOD of History and Politics, who has been in attendance throughout, Nomalanga Mkize, very supportive of the work of the center. Colleagues, I think it makes sense for all of us that just to say that it's been a tough year, but we've managed to get things done, even though most of them, they had to be done virtually. It is still interesting, as I think Dr. Motsemo was saying this morning, that that we are able to capture our emotions, our sensory emotions through the camera, and also the gender sensitivities, of the camera, and also the memory, because most of the young people in our own families, they've got access to these, to the camera more than the books sometimes. So it is important that the work of the Center for Women and Gender Studies, Yanaya, the media, and videography, touch those lives. And I take note, Dr. Motseme, on what you've mentioned about the children and the trauma of violence and how they experience it. So it's something that I think we'll need to really pay attention to. And I really, really enjoyed each and every session. Thanks to the students who are here from the Department of Media and Media Studies here at Mandela, and the whole team that brought everything to us on time. If there were any errors, we apologize. We are work in progress, but we are grateful that all of this came together. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thanks, Pumla. Thanks, Subeshini. Thanks, Ponzo, for always showing up. And also, thanks everyone who is here, colleagues. Much appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And Spogazi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Director Dr. Babala Makwakwana. Colleagues, we are closing the session soon, but we'll just play us out with just some funky music as we enjoy what's left of our weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues.